Yeah, pleased to be here. This is wonderful. Jackie, I'm going to shift you back a bit so I can see Dinah and that sort of bit. We don't want this sort of line situation going on. Right, okay, so hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm in my day job is 60 by 9, which I'm a co-founder of a media agency, but also my job of purpose is being the head of Allyship for Bloom UK, which is a network for women in comms. And I'm also co-founder of Bloom in Colour, which is something that Dinah will talk about a bit more, so I'm not going to go into that. And today we are here to talk about breaking bias, particularly breaking bias in that we need to, but also particularly within Bloom and how these wonderful ladies here, as well as us, are going about doing that. We only have 20 minutes, so we're going to fire straight through. We at Bloom have, as I sort of said before, this challenge of, gender equality, really, which we're trying to sort of fight for. But what we sort of recognize within Bloom is that there are areas, in other words, there's one shoe doesn't fit all. Yes, we are all women, but within that we all have sort of challenges in that. So there are areas within Bloom that we have kind of created to particularly focus on areas of passion. So we have three wonderful ladies here, and without further ado, I'm gonna dive to Jackie, Jackie will introduce herself, and then Dinah, and then Joe, and I'm gonna ask one question, which they can all kind of address, because again, we sort of have 20 minutes. And so if you introduce yourself, and the question is, very much and very simply, how have you taken on the challenge of bias within your inclusion group?
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm Jackie. I co-founded Bloomwombs as part of the Bloom network. And at Bloomwombs, we created the space essentially to give women and people around them a space to talk about their experiences and also to make change and to learn. And that's everything around sort of their wombs, essentially. So from periods right through to menopause. And we felt that, there were lots of stories coming out across different industries about women's sort of struggles and then feeling isolated in those struggles. So, for example, people hiding their IVF appointments because they just didn't feel that, they could tell anybody, or that the support system was there in their actual company. Women literally carrying on with pitch meetings whilst having a miscarriage. I mean, really horrendous stories that really touched us and was happening to people quite regularly, and right through to gynecological issues and problems. So we just felt that something was needed. So in 2019 we started Bloomwombs, and it's been growing as part of the network. And as Elizabeth was saying, people come with different experiences and different backgrounds, and therefore their experiences are all very individualized. So what we want to do is give women voices to be able to share those experiences. And to Elizabeth's question, we like to think we've made some changes. For example, we have an amazing co-mentorship scheme called the Exchange within Bloom. And again, it shows how our groups kind of all melt into each other. But one big change was that the couple within that group, the female, managed to influence the male to introduce free sanitary products in toilets in his company. So it might sound like a really small gesture, but would have made a huge difference to the women in that office. And wouldn't it be great if we could do that in lots of different offices, for example? I've recently heard about one agency, giving free IVF treatment to its employers. I mean, what a rarity. I've never heard of that before, and wouldn't that be amazing if we had that too? And something we've worked really hard at in Bloomwombs and across the network in different areas is policy forming. We've managed to get some companies to create policies that support women and their families in terms of, whether they've had real gynecological problems and issues, if they're having IVF or assisted fertility treatment of some kind, and all the way through to perimenopause symptoms and menopause. And these policies are obviously invaluable in kind of creating more talk around these areas and normalising it so people don't feel uncomfortable and stigmatised. I think they're the main things that we've done, and we'd love to do more. This whole area of wombs is so big that, you know, there's so much to talk about and so much to do.
Yeah, I mean, which is that's.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to catch the first of our brand challenges.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was you guys. Yeah. So, and then the thing is, do you think that there's still a lot to do? Do you think there's still challenges? Do you think companies are still listening? How are the people you're actually representing? How are they feeling ultimately? Because there is an element of suffering in silence, isn't there?
There is suffering in silence, and I think, you know, I know that, you know, I've had my own experiences of these things. You know, I've had baby losses, and I didn't tell people because I just felt like I had to get on with the job, and I didn't feel like what were they going to do to support me? You know, I didn't know what was available, and I didn't feel like I could be that open about it until afterwards. And I think also, in fairness, that, you know, companies need training and help and support and how to support people, because I don't think the knowledge is there. It's definitely improving, but it's not there, and there still is that fear, or, you know, a woman saying she's going through the perimenopause because you know, and she won't get that job promotion because, oh, you know, she's a bit tired and she's too hot, and whatever else, those stigmas and, you know, around that woman. So I think there's a long way to go.
Perfectly segueing over to Joe then, really, sort of talking about perimenopause. And Joe, I think it'll be great to actually obviously talk about the inclusion group, your inclusion group, but also what's motivated you, and certainly what still needs to be done within the area.
Yeah, okay, so I'm representing the over 50s today. Woo! Not too many women aged over 50, but we're going to change that, right? Because if we don't change it, then your careers are going to be as short as some of the women that I started working with when they were 30. And I lead Mpower, which is there to champion and campaign for midlife women. And we've got a massive problem in our industry. We've got a whole generation who are literally missing in action. Where are they? When did they get forced out? How did they get forced out? How do we get them back? And how do we stop it happening to anyone else? So quite a bit going on with Mpower. One of the big issues around hitting midlife is the menopause. And there's been a lot written about that now, and people are understanding it. There's a lot of agencies that haven't got this shit covered, and there's a lot of women going through some really bad things on their own. So we're going to be launching a policy document next week to help agencies and ad tech companies understand what their responsibility is. So just like a personal example, I'm going through menopause and I get panic attacks. It's just part of the hormones leaving your body, leaving you a bit panicked. And Zappy is amazing, because I was able to say to my boss yesterday, there's absolutely nothing going on, but I'm having a panic attack, and that's okay. You just let it pass rather than worrying about it. And then the other thing we're going to be doing is understanding this whole issue about age. Like, what is our problem with age? Like, it seems to be it's okay to have a couple of old people at the top of an organisation, mainly men, but not okay to have older people weaved in and out of our teams. And that's not normal. That's not how other industries are, and it's not how the general population are. So we've got to get to grips with that, and I'm looking forward to doing the research, to understanding it, and then inviting the industry to help solve it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the manifesto when that launches, because absolutely, there always used to be a thing in agencies or everywhere in media where the age-old question, as age-old pun intended, question of where's everyone over 34, you know, and anyone over that just sort of goes into the ether. Or menopause actually is natural. I mean, it's normal, you know, we're going to go through it, and yet somehow it's sort of parked in the drawer and suddenly panically pulled out with the one individual struggling to sort of know how to deal with it. One, because they don't understand it, there's not much exposure about it, and there's no one to talk to. So doing incredible work there, really. I'm going to now move over to the lovely Dinah. who's my fellow co-founder for Bloom in Colour. Same question, and perhaps maybe sort of layer on sort of elements that we've sort of talked about, as you know, within Bloom, but particularly with Bloom in Colour, obviously, because of the setup, women of colour that you represent.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So yeah, I'm the co-founder of Bloom in Colour with Elizabeth. I joined Bloom in 2020 and was immediately struck by this feeling of camaraderie and the unity that we have as women that are trying to fight gender equality within our industry. But there was something missing. I felt a little bit, maybe unconsciously, that I've always had throughout my career of where are the other women that look like me? And if I feel like that, maybe there's other members that feel a bit similar. So I connected with Elizabeth and another Bloom member, and we decided that we were going to start Bloom in Colour, which would be a safe space for our women of colour members, but also a really active space for our members, white members, to be allies in that space and really hold conversations that can be challenging. Like 2020, we all know kind of there was a massive worldwide change in terms of race equality, and there was a lot of conversations and a lot of questions that may feel uncomfortable to have, but we wanted to create a space to have those. And then since then, we've kind of just gone from strength to strength. We've also really worked with Bloom as an organisation and a whole, and all of the inclusion groups, to kind of have that intersectional lens to everything that we do and make sure that really forms the foundations of our strategy for the years ahead, for the activities that we do, for the conversations, for the communication that we have, making sure that we're being as representative as possible for all women. But the things that we've managed to achieve and that we're really proud of are the internal and external conversations that we've had. So we've had internal member events where we've talked about black resilience and this notion that black women are stronger and can carry more of a burden than any other woman, and why we need to kind of break that stereotype. We've had conversations about black hair, Zoom calls, being your authentic self and what that actually means. And we've also had an external session that we're particularly proud of with Meta and BRIM, which is Black Representation in Marketing, last year on the lack of black women in leadership roles, the challenges and what those solutions kind of look like. So we'll have a punchy conversation. We're not as scared to kind of, really talk about what people may be afraid to talk about, because that's where change happens. And I think one of the things that me and Elizabeth are hugely passionate about is moving this conversation forward. We understand, everybody's aware that we need to have diverse representation. Everybody knows that we need to be collecting that data. What frustrates me is that we have the data and there's still no change. So if we look at the gender pay gap and the ethnicity pay gap, if we know that we're underpaying our women and women of colour, anyone who is responsible for hiring right now, pay equally. Really simple solution. Really simple solution. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
And I've got some stats about why this is important, but they're a bit heavy to hear. So I don't want to learn them. So I've written them down because I don't want them to continue to be the way that they are. But the recent Fawcett Society report shows that women of colour in the UK find that institutional racism is a commonplace in all sectors and in all organisations. The 75% of women of colour have experienced racism at work. 61% have been forced to mould to conform. So whether that's their name, their hair, the language and terminology that they use in the workplace. In terms of recruitment discrimination, 52% of women of colour have experienced discrimination at some point during the recruitment process. And feeling locked out of progression, 28% of women of colour versus 19% of white women report managers blocking their progression in the workplace, and a further 42% have reported being pushed out of promotion despite having good feedback. So we have the data, we know this is happening. We're all responsible for creating this change, and what I love about Bloom in Colour is we formed it with a mission about elevating the voices and representation of women of colour within Bloom, but also within our industry, but that not to be the onus of women of colour, but all women. we can't talk about gender equality without looking at the intersectionality of race and ethnicity, which is sometimes sidelined or thought of at the last moment, and we need to stop doing that. Bloom and Bloom in Colour and all of the other networks that we kind of connect with, the inclusion groups, we have that intersectional thread, but we need to see that within the industry as a whole.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Dinah. Conscious of our time, we have obviously 3 here, but we do, just to sort of shout out, we do also have parenting. We do have neurodiversity as a group, you know.
Yeah.
We've got Bloom Pride, you know, for the LGBTQ group within ours, and people can come in and create their own areas. There's so many areas, disability, you know, hidden disability and so on. Me as head of Allyship, I kind of sort of get the lens into all these areas, and it's just powerful, but it's also quite a challenge, really. There's so much work to do within our industry. Hot off the press, we are going to launch, we'll be launching an Allyship code, which we will be applying. So we will be launching that. That is kind of like a sense check reference point, you know, for those who are looking to be allies, not sure about how to apply that and so on, which we will feed into internally but also externally. Very conscious of our time. So we have 5 minutes left, which is wonderful. I mean, well done, ladies. And we can open up for questions if there are any questions.
Does anyone have any questions in the room? Any questions? Okay, well, while you're thinking about a question, I have one. Julia, of course you have a question.
Tom, so this is great, and this is so good to have a platform for this, but I really want everybody here to have a takeaway, something they can implement. One thing from each of you that is a takeaway and it's actionable and that people can really put into play. What is it?
Let's go with Jo, I'm reckoning.
I think for the people who are responsible for recruitment within the agency, I think try and understand why your age group is so young. We used to put it on the creds. Average age of our agency is 26, like it was a good thing. And I think if you've still got that stat, then I think, you know, look at why that stat's happened and what happened to the women that are missing in action.
I'd follow on from that. Again, as I said, we've got the stats on representation, particularly when we're looking at from a leadership or managerial level up. Do something about it, change the environment, make sure people feel that they're included and they're welcome. If you're not getting diverse applicants, particularly at a senior level, it's probably because they don't feel included or psychologically safe. So to hold the mirror up to yourself and do the work that's needed to make people feel that they can be included and be themselves.
Thanks.
I think a nugget would probably be, talk to the women in your company and, try and make it easy for them to talk out. And, if you can make a policy around and protect those people, then make policies. I mean, everything counts. And, with Bloomwombs, it's a large area. But, if you can make one small change and create a policy in your own company, then brilliant. Go for it.
Yeah, and I would say, apart from obviously considering the intersectionality side of things, so if you are looking at a policy, as I said before, one shoe doesn't fit all. So don't apply one generic sort of line that you think is going to apply to everyone. But also, if you are representing or looking to be the ally, be authentic with it. So the person you're representing or you're creating a voice for needs to be in the room, to actually influence that policy, that change, that story. Coming up with a policy and actually not, hearing the voice and actually having them represent, not just, presuming, isn't enough. You need to have the authenticity that kind of comes with it, I'd say.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Give a massive round of applause for the panel. You've all got homework. Get on with it.